The QMC Board and Collar Series for EMS professionals welcomes you to Excuse My Medic, the podcast version of an MCI with Gary Harvat, Chuck Humphrey, and Ed Marasco. Excuse My Medic takes a unique look at today's emergency medical service with news and information, opinionated discussions, lively talk, sporadic jabs, and even a few belly laughs from our world of emergency medical services. Excuse My Medic is brought to you by Quick Med Claims, a national leader in emergency medical service revenue cycle management and reimbursement consulting. Now, hang on to the bench seat and tighten your lap belt as these old guys from EMS past take you on a Code 3 ride without touching the brakes. You've had the disclaimer, and if you're still brave enough to stick it out, let's get started. Take it away, guys.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gary Harvat, and this is another rousing edition of Excuse My Medic, EM2, as we sometimes refer to it. We have myself and Chuck Humphrey today running the show. We're typically joined by our colleague, Ed Marasco. But Ed is he on a cruise, Chuck? Is that where he's at?
He's on a cruise. Yep.
Yeah, my heart bleeds for poor Ed. I feel bad for him.
That's wonderful. Glad
I'm sure it's cloudy and rainy and just wherever he is right now. So
you're hoping, huh?
Yeah, no, maybe not. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I will tell you, we have a beautiful day here in Pittsburgh. Very few 80-degree days with low humidity. So I actually had the computer outside, but as I stopped and listened, every bird is at the bird feeder and they're having a feeding frenzy and they're talking to each other. And I thought, this is not going to be good. So I came inside. You still may hear some chirping in the background because I have the sliding screen door open, but regardless, it's a beautiful day. How about you, Chuck?
We actually have, I believe, some of the Canadian wildfire haze here.
Oh boy.
So it's, while it's a sunny day, it's overcast. And so the winds coming from the northwest is bringing some of that haze over us. So we have a beautiful day, but it's just not quite bright sun.
Yeah, I have a friend in Whitby, Ontario, and I typically, when this happens, call her and go, Laura, can somebody throw some water on it, please? Seems like every year we get these wildfires coming down on us. Now, I'll let Chuck do the introductions here of Charlotte, but Charlotte, folks, is in Texas, where I'm sure it's probably only about 40 or 50 degrees down there today, cloudy and overcast, because they never have nice weather down there. Go ahead, Char. What is it? What is it? 98?
It is 86, which is very nice for us in June. And we don't have fires, but we have Sahara dust. And so we have the same thing where it's supposed to be a clear day, but there's just this dirty overcast because it's from the dust.
Now, is it lay on your car and on your sidewalks? Do you is it like something you would sweep up?
If the wind dies, well, the wind now is not bad. Yeah, maybe it might be all over the cars, but it's Saharan dust, and I don't know if it's coming your way next. I don't know.
We don't get much Sahara dust up here in Pennsylvania. I will tell you that.
Nope.
So that you can keep
it. You may have it. Thank you.
Yeah, keep it there. Keep it there. We have enough poor weather. We don't need more of it here, especially in Western Pennsylvania. I think we get. We're on a roll here. We don't have rain predicted till Friday, so this is like manna from heaven today for sure. So
it's been wet and very cold.
Oh, terrible. So, well, it's good to have Charlotte here today with us, Chuck. I'll let you do the introductions, and I think this is actually an interesting segment we have planned today. It's something that I think is not only interesting to us, but also to many of our listeners because it's very thought-provoking. As something in speaking with Charlotte before and Chuck before about this, I really thought, my goodness, we need to bring this to the forefront, and hopefully we'll do that today. So, Chuck, will you be kind enough to do the honors? And
I will,
Charlotte?
For sure. So, introduce Charlotte to you today. Charlotte is the Chief Compliance Officer at Quick Med Claims, and we've asked her to come on and talk about a project that that I've been graced with working together with Charlotte on post-retirement here. One of the fun things, and I say fun, and it truly is because I'm a billing nerd. There's no doubt about it. My EMS career and billing combined, they still think I know something, Gary, which is very frightening. But nonetheless, we've been involved in a project, Charlotte and I, along with a committee of individuals from QMC, about ground balance billing. So one of the things that you all know, and I'm sure many of our listeners are aware, is that there is the No Surprises Act. But when it comes to ground ambulance, the No Surprises Act does not apply. Applies to air ambulance, does not apply to ground ambulance, applies to all other healthcare disciplines. So that leaves the door wide open for individual states to determine whether or not we can balance bill beyond when an ambulance is not participating beyond the insurance payment. And so we're going to talk about how, first off, I'll just ask Charlotte to share some of her background and credentials, how she came to QMC. But this is one of those times where we kind of open the curtain and let you see what goes on behind the scenes. And really, for a shameless plug, I'll just plug my days in sales and compliance in QMC. I'm remiss if I don't share that this is the kind of exercise that an ambulance service, if you're listening and you're an ambulance service administrator and you're a QMC client or you're not a QMC client, this is the kind of thing that goes on behind the scenes that you'll never see. That just happens, but it's so very important. And one of the things about Quick Make Claims that is laudable is that they have a chief compliance officer, a very active, good compliance department that answers directly up to the board of directors and makes sure that all of our clients remain in compliance and our practices are painting between the lines. And so that's the overall picture. And we're going to talk about this project and just give you a little insight about some of the stresses that QMC goes through to make sure that we're compliant and protecting our clients at all levels. So Charlotte, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and just share a little bit about your background, how you came to QMC, and then we'll get into talking about the project.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in healthcare since 1999. I've worked a lot on the hospital and physician revenue cycle side. I've also worked in a public health entity in Dallas for a period of time. My background is actually, I started in operations. So I started in the revenue cycle piece with the billing and patient call center and appeals and disputes and all of those kinds of things. And then, in the early 2000s, this little law called HIPAA that we needed to be compliant with, entered the scene. And my CCO at that time was like, hey, why don't you just do this in addition to your other job? Because nobody knew that HIPAA was going to take over the world and that we were going to eventually have, dedicated privacy officers. And so that was my first little toe into compliance. I was one of HCA's early compliance officers. We were just trying to figure it out. Everybody was trying to figure it out. And I went back to operations after that. I was at HCA. I went to Tenet. I made the jump to compliance in 2011 and kind of never looked back. I started out as a compliance officer, was ultimately a chief compliance officer at a revenue cycle company for many years. And then eventually QMC found me, and QMC reminded me a lot of a period of my career when I was really, really happy and I really enjoyed the work I was doing. I was working for a company that really treated their clients as important, not just another client. And QMC reminded me of that. They seem to have that same philosophy. And so I really wanted to get back into that. And I'm a first responder wife. I'm a first responder mom. So I like that I get to enter the EMS world a little deeper than I've ever gotten to before, and at least feel like I'm playing a little bit of a part in it, even if it's just the background, money, laws, compliance, all the boring stuff.
So, it's great.
Well, if I can just interrupt for a minute, for those of you who are listening, yes, it is understood that Charlotte herself does not have an EMS background, but every time that screen door opens at Charlotte's house, there is a flavor of public safety.
Mhm.
Charlotte, what do you have? A police officer and
Yep.
a paramedic or an
Yeah,
EMT.
I have guns and hoses. So so my husband, it's a regular battle of, who's the best. My husband is a police officer and has been since 1999. And my son is a firefighter paramedic. And so yeah, I got both of them.
That's
So
great.
you can talk the language. You can talk the language.
Absolutely. I mean, even if, yeah, can I go out and do what the guys in the truck actually do and save somebody's life? Probably not. But I do get the world, you live in it as a
Yeah.
spouse, you're living it. So,
Yeah,
or as a mom,
abs-
right?
You have to understand it.
You
Hear
have
all
to
the stories.
understand
I
it.
understand it. Yeah.
Whether you like it or not. Yeah, if that emergency apparatus sitting on Charlotte's desk doesn't give it away, that explanation surely tells you that she has a good understanding of what we do and what we're in for. And for those of you that are also listening at home, just to kind of touch on the compliance a little further, having been a part of QMC prior to my retirement for many years, as have Chuck. I know folks typically go out and look periodically for third-party billing companies. Folks, obviously QMC is a great company, but if you're not looking towards them, make sure it's great that you have wonderful billers and money comes in the door, but make sure you've got an organization that has a very, very strong compliance department, because otherwise you could get yourselves in a pickle without that. So it's one thing to get the money in, but it's got to be
Right.
compliantly.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about ground balance billing. So we
Yeah.
know that there are 14 of the 50 states, and actually more than 50 because there's territories involved as well. So Puerto Rico and American Samoa and some of the U.S. territories are involved in what we encompass in our scope. But out of those 50 plus, there are 14 states have enacted laws that govern whether we, as the billing agent or an ambulance service that's doing their own billing, can bill beyond what they get paid. And so the stress has been, and I say stress, that may not be the best word, but it is a stressor in that we have to make sure, because every state's a little different. And so we decided that as we started digging into, and we started out, Charlotte, using the American Ambulance Association's their ground balance billing tool, which has been very, very helpful. And that's another shameless plug. If you're not part of your state or the AAA, consider it. There are lobbying efforts. They're the group. But so they've developed a wonderful tool. And then we took it one step further, got together and said, okay, now how do we apply it? How do we take it from a document that exists out there, apply it to QMC, and then take it even one or two steps more and write SOPs to make sure that everybody in the billing loop is following the rules. And that's where the tension comes in. And I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte and just explain a little bit about the inception of that, how that kind of morphed, and now where we're moving with that. Because I'm excited. I've been excited about where it's going. We have wonderful meetings on a regular basis, and stakeholders from throughout the organization just developing this tool so we can expand and use it. But let's talk a little bit about some of the various states, some of the quirks that are involved. The legislation doesn't spell things out easily, and I'm going to let you expand on that. And that's kind of groundwork, and you take it from there. But just to explain to our listeners a little bit about the process that we continually go through.
Yeah, so QMC, I've been with the organization about 10 months now. And of course, when I got here, QMC was monitoring the ground balance billing rules and, billing patients according to the EOB and things of that nature. But what you really have to learn with ground balance billing, well, a lot with anything in billing actually in EMS, is that it's cross-functional, right? It's kind of one thing affects this section of your revenue cycle, but it also affects this section and this section and this section. And so one of the things when I got here, ground balance billing was kind of new for me, right? So I had to learn it. And then of course, if you're only operating in one state, you only have to know your state. But when you're a company like QMC, where we're servicing clients in 40 plus states, you have to know and monitor 40 plus states. Because while there's 14 states today, There's several other that are in process, right? And we're tracking those legislative bills as they make their way through the state legislature. And how they start out may not be how they end, but you've got to track them and know where they're at and who's looking at what. So, there was a matrix, the states that had ground balance billing tools, there was a matrix there, and it called out the key requirements of the regulation and stuff. But then, so kind of dug into it, and I started asking some questions. We really learned that operations had questions, and while they were doing a good job of complying, they were like, well, we're having a hard time understanding, are our payers paying correctly? Right. And so as we dug in and started asking questions and talking cross-functionally to each other, so we established a committee. And I know sometimes you think, oh God, another committee. But because this is so impactful across so many parts of the revenue cycle, it made sense to bring people together. So we have people from posting and people from AR management, people from patient advocacy, because those are the folks that are talking to your patients when they call in. And your patients don't understand what their EOB says. They don't understand if the law applies to their service or it doesn't. So you got to make sure your patient advocacy knows how to educate those patients to make sure that they understand what's covered under the law and what their rights are and what your rights are as a provider.
Well,
right?
and Charlotte, most people think that it is NSA, and so they call
100%.
incensed how you're not allowed to bill me.
Yes.
And it's and then on top of it, we know that a lot of the insurance payers carry on those little messages at the bottom of that EOB, and patients read that and say, you're not allowed to bill us. And that creates stress for our people in trying to explain to patients that are thinking one way and they don't realize. And it's not ill intention. They really believe that we're not able to do it because they think it's all encompassing. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So we pulled this cross-functional committee together and we said, well, started to try to discover the pain points, right? What are the pain points with all this ground balance billing stuff? And Chuck, to your point, people don't understand NSA, average people, right? Don't understand that NSA does not apply to the ground. And then, so as these states start bringing these rules in, some of the states kept it simple, right? There's a couple kept it simple. Most of them did not. And these regulations are written by people who don't work in EMS, don't work in revenue cycle. They've probably been a patient at some point, but may or may not have been an ambulance patient. It's hard to say. And when they write these regulations, not just ground balance billing, but in general, they don't think about how administratively difficult it can be to operationalize them, right?
Yeah.
And in our world, you've got the provider, you've got the revenue cycle company like us, QMC, and you've got the payers. And when we really started to dig in and say, okay, we're billing to whatever the EOB says, fine, what are our pain points? And then started going back into the laws to see if those laws address those pain points in any way or did they not. And one of the biggest challenges that we ran into was understanding how the payers are paying. Because some of these regulations are written like you can pay this way or that way or this way or that way. Some of them have like 4 options of how you can pay. And so then you start going through and analyzing your revenue cycle, your AR, and trying to understand how a payer is paying it. It's all over the map. And you're trying to figure it out, right? Making sure that you're actually getting paid the right amount. So if you're currently in a state that has a ground balance billing, don't assume that payer is paying you correctly. Because they may not be paying you in accordance with the law. So make sure that you've got a ground balance billing rule in your state, that you've read that and you've understood how they're supposed to pay, and that you take the steps to try to hold them accountable to that. Some of them, to Chuck's point, we found out, for example, in Texas, okay, the Texas rule only applies to municipalities, right? We have another state that only applies to private. So you can see there's just a wide variance in how these rules are written. But like one of the things we found in Texas that was really creating challenges in our patient advocacy area was EOBs had language on it that was very confusing to the patients. And they thought, well, I don't know anything. Well, first of all, was this a municipality? And then Texas only applies to certain plans. Is your plan one of those certain plans, right? But universally, the payers are slapping language on the EOBs because they don't know if you're a municipality. They don't know necessarily if that I don't know that they're doing the work, I guess, maybe to understand if that plan is or isn't covered. And so you end up with potentially a lot of messy payment and potentially underpayments. And overpayments probably not as risky, but underpayments potentially pretty risky, because I don't know that the payers, remember, the payers are trying to figure out the same thing we're trying to figure out, right? Is how does the law apply and how do I comply with that law, right? So then, you've got the challenge of, like in Texas, you get Texas all figured out, everything's in place, and Texas is potentially, I don't know if it's going to happen, but potentially going to sunset in September and be something completely different. So you also, if you have one in your state, you can't treat it as a one and done, because there may or may not be a sunset date on it, and there may or may not be a revision. We've found some states where we have to point at like almost 3 different regulations to put it together to figure out what is the expectation in this regulation. So it's very challenging, and understanding how it affects every kind of portion, from posting to then AR, understanding if we got paid correctly, and challenging those payers if they're not paying correctly, right? So you got to do the analysis, and then you got to figure out how to challenge them, because they're of course going to tell you, no, we paid it correctly. Well, you got to be prepared to challenge them, and then making sure that whoever's going to be talking to those patients is in a position to be able to help them understand what they do and don't owe.
Yeah, you're being kind. I'm going to be less kind to the payers, because we know it's a game, and they're hoping. Payers are hoping. Some payers, not all. Some payers are hoping that we won't bother with this, and we'll just accept what they pay and close it out and write it off. And that's something that we don't do at QMC for clients. We make sure we get every penny involved, and that sometimes ticks off the payers. They don't like that, but it's due diligence. We have we have a responsibility to serve the client and get every penny that's due to them. And you mentioned Texas. One of the things that I know we did, Charlotte, you recall, we communicated with the Texas Ambulance Association and filled them in on the EOB language being across the board. Mm-hmm. And now that they're in discussion about, post sunset, they took that back to the legislator and said, hey, do you know that, some of these insurance payers are doing this and trying to help educate them. Mm-hmm. So there is that.
Never heard of it.
Communication.
That was my question.
Yeah. Until Chuck called them, and I said, you were talking about it, and it's like, maybe the Texas Ambulance Association's doing something about this. Maybe they have some suggestions, right?
Yeah.
And when Chuck called them, that was the first time they'd ever heard of this problem. So now when we review the state legislature, we talk about it or talk about the challenges we're seeing with it, whatever. One of the questions now that we ask kind of routinely is like, is there anything in this that potentially the State Ambulance Association could help us with? Because if we're not making them aware of the challenges that a regulation is seeing, then they can't help you. So, I know Chuck mentioned, like, get involved with the AAA. Make sure you're connecting with your state Ambulance Association too, and make them aware when challenges are being presented, because they can actually go forward and do something. We happened to hit Texas at just the right time too, because they were getting ready to go in to discussions about the potentially updating the regulation in September. So it's really, really important to connect with them and let them know when you're seeing problems.
Well, and then some of the states, Charlotte, had given a mandate. The legislature asked a mandate for some of these rates to be published. California is a good example. In the legislation, it specifically says that there should be a publishing statewide of the acceptable payment rates. And now we're 2 years into that legislation, and it just does not exist. And there doesn't seem to be, it seems to be out of sight, out of mind, and there doesn't seem to be any urgency about getting that published. So here we sit, or ambulances sit, wondering what to do. What
are we supposed to get
paid? What can't we do? Yeah.
Yep. What's the rate?
That's just crazy. And a lot of the legislation is actually massaging existing rules and regs that have been out there. And so they're codifying that and changing that. So you have to read that, then go to the original legislation, see how it massages other pieces of that, and then tie it all back. And in some cases, we have to go to legal representation to even understand that. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. And so sometimes we use outside counsel. in order to make sense of these things. And so that takes time.
Sure.
We meet typically on an every other week basis, and that 2 week period, sometimes we come back and say, well, we couldn't reach this, or we don't have an opinion yet, or it just, it kicks a can down the line. But staying on top of it is a full-time job. There's no doubt about it.
It's a lot of work and a team effort. And Chuck, not to cut you off, Gary, but one of the things I just want to touch on that Chuck just said was, if you are currently in a state that does not have a ground balance billing rule, you need to find out if your state is thinking about a ground balance billing rule. And if they are, get involved, because they're all looking at the other states that already have existing rules. And some of these rules are so complex and some of them are simple. Okay. Others are complicated, overcomplicated, totally complicated, about as clear as mud in some cases. You don't want them looking at those, right? So get involved if there's any, and there's a good chance that your state's probably talking about it, right? Because everybody's talking about surprise billing. So get involved and get connected and state your opinion. If they propose, they do like a proposed rule and you have a chance to review and comment before it gets to signing off and being enacted, because the more complex the rule is, of course, the greater margin you have for either non-compliance or not being paid appropriately.
Yeah.
So just curious here, Chuck. Texas has a very active ambulance association, at least the best of my knowledge, when I was still at QMC. So after they got over the shock of what you were telling them, I guess my next question is, so what's their approach going to be? What were they planning on?
Discussion. They're continually having input with the legislature there. If the sunset is allowed to go and they do massage moving forward, we're hoping that that's part of it. Now, if they decide to just let it stand as it is and the input isn't taken, then we'll just drift down the way. There's no way of knowing that, but at least we know that someone at that state level is having productive conversation and calling that to the attention of their representatives. And that's really all that we can hope for.
Can do.
Here in Pennsylvania, for example, we have a balanced billing rule, but the weirdness of it was, and I truly believe our legislators here had good intentions. So they tied it to a direct pay rule that said, if you opt in, you'll get paid directly. Well, that certainly is good, because we know in our state, many, many checks went to patients who then, it's Christmas time, we're going to buy Christmas presents, we're going to fix the car, we're not going to pay the ambulance. And there was no recourse. But the problem with that legislation is that it never tied a mandated payment. So basically, if you opted in as an ambulance service, they can pay whatever they want. You have to accept it. So guess what? Here we are, 3, 4, 5 years later, only 2 ambulance services out of the hundreds statewide opted in. Now, the Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania, which is very active, a very excellent organization, is lobbying to try to get a new rule in place that will tie the payment rate to, and typically what has been state by state is about a 325% payment rate against the Medicare fee schedule. If that goes in place, now there is a mandated payment for the insurance to pay, and then ambulances will obviously participate in that because they're guaranteed an acceptable payment rate. And so that's the kind of tension that goes on, that you need to have that input. And individual services alone, you can contact your legislators, but there's a lot more power in collective bargaining and discussions at the state house.
And that's my worry, Chuck. We recognize that there's some great state ambulance associations out there, and we're not going to get down the list, but there's others that may be somewhat behind.
Yep.
And this comes up to, while you were sleeping, this is what happened. And I think that if the message here is one thing today is, be vigilant, be smart, and get your state association involved with this.
Yeah.
And if you're a provider that operates in like a multitude of states, where like we don't operate, but we service clients in a multitude of states, you know, you need to be savvy about how you monitor that environment,
Mhm.
right? So there's tools out there. I will say my entire career, I don't know that I've ever seen a really good legislation monitoring tool.
Yes.
They're all a little iffy, but you know the triple A is good. You know, you can try Legiscan. You know, lean into like there's different websites out there. One that I got turned on to recently was AIM High, AIM High, and he posts something legislatively almost every single day. Google alerts can help potentially. So it's just, and even if you just operate in one state, you can still do things like that to try to help you stay up on what's happening. And then, Chuck, you know, like another thing that we were talking about, and you kind of touched on this too, about letting your ambulance association know about some of the challenges. Like, to go back to Texas again, it's a good example, but there's several states that like the ground balance billing rule only applies to these certain types of plans, but not these types of plans, right?
Right.
Well, how you can tell people who wrote these laws don't understand how the ambulance works, because do we always have a copy of the insurance card? No, we do not always have a copy of the insurance card. Very frequently we don't. And the card might be what indicates if that's a plan that's, say, a state regulated plan versus a non-state regulated plan. And it varies state to state what's state regulated. Well, if you don't have a card, that's very difficult to ascertain
Sure.
if that's a covered plan or not, right? So then again, you're going back to that reliance on the payer. Well, that's a scary situation to put yourself in, right? And so look for those little nuances, right, that are in your rules, because the rules are not as simple as don't balance bill. They're not.
Yeah.
They're just not that simple.
Yeah, and the other strategy is you know, an ambulance service can choose to become a participating provider with your primary insurances. Now, some ambulances don't do that because then they're forced to accept a payment rate that they feel is substandard, and we understand that. But you can negotiate and get in network, and if that's the case, then that solves some of this, because then there is codified rules in your contract with that insurance payer. But the problem in EMS is that we're alerted to respond to people that sometimes are out of our area, are not with the insurance plans that you're connected with in the 911 world, and you still have to transport those people. We have a duty to serve, and so it gets a little jumbled. It's different than walking in the doctor's office, presenting your card. The doctor runs a check for your eligibility, and voila, you're part of our network. That doesn't happen with EMS, and that's why it makes EMS difficult to
Very challenging.
to navigate. And the
Very.
other thing is, I was going to mention is that you know, it doesn't look like ground ambulance is going to be included in NSA, and that's a good thing, because the NSA process right now, we know, because QMC does air ambulance billing, this arbitration process is an absolute nightmare. It
Yeah.
is
Terrible.
bogged down. It's overloaded. If they were to add ground into that, so the latest committee on that has basically said, we think it's best left with the individual states. So we don't see that coming nationwide as a federal rule anytime soon. That's probably a good thing. That certainly would simplify it,
Yeah.
but it would make it so very much more messy. And so I think we're going to, you know, probably end up sticking with this kind of state by state hodgepodge, and that's good, and yet it's not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a very much a tightrope. Having been deeply involved in the air medical side years ago, you know, they function. It's a needed service, but like everything else, they need to pay their bills, and when their money is bogged down for months and months and months on end, what you're seeing in the industry is going to continue to happen. And that's some of the smaller flight programs that are critical. It's especially to many rural areas are going to just, you know, board up the doors. And, you know, yes, I understand the importance behind the NSA, but I also understand the importance of getting care to someone in need quickly when that's not always the case by ground. So it's a tough one. It's a tough
Absolutely.
problem.
And even within the legislation, some, we mentioned that there's different payment levels. So some of them say, well, we'll pay you 325% of Medicare, but then if that's the lesser of the charge or your charges are lesser, then we'll pay you lesser. And oh, by the way, you may end up having to accept usual and customary. Nobody has ever, in my 25 years of being in part of EMS billing, has ever really told me what usual and customary actually means.
It's a secret number at the
They love to use those words, though.
Fairy
They
dust
love to put
comes
it out
down
there
from heaven, and that's usual and customary. That's where things get so very
We
frustrating.
just had a state that we reviewed, and they're paying like 200% of Medicare. That's nothing. Like
Nothing.
What is that? I mean, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that that's what's going to get written into your legislation before it gets written into that legislation, that's why I think tracking it from the beginning. This is why I think our ground balance billing process has been really, really good, because we've taken the time. Okay, great. We're not balance billing. Great. But let's go back. Let's talk about our pain points. Let's talk about the nuances, and how do we manage those nuances, and how do we address those nuances, and how do we talk to our ambulance associations, and how do we help our patients understand, and all of those things. So even if you get one in your state, you get it implemented, and you're like, okay, great, we're not balance billing, make sure that you have a process afterwards to identify the problems and the pain points. Don't
100%.
just, because you're probably potentially leaving money that your department deserves based on the services that were provided. So make sure that you've got an after process to go back and take a look.
Yeah. So every dollar counts.
Every dollar. That's one thing I really learned in EMS. It's always true in healthcare. Every dollar counts, but I think it's even more. I'm going to say it. I think it's even more important and challenging in EMS, because like Chuck said, so many people don't have contracts. In hospitals, you're generally working with expected reimbursement, and you know what's going to be coming in, and you tackle it that way, right? It's a little bit different in EMS. You guys need every dollar, and you deserve every dollar, every dollar that you're rightfully owed.
And it's being compassionate with patients who don't understand.
Absolutely right.
Many times
the consumer does not understand this at all.
No,
Nor
we
should
we transport people sometimes at their worst moments of life.
they.
And then they get these bills or EOBs that they don't understand. I just had a hospitalization where I just got EOB back, and my doctor wants to institute a medication for an underlying condition that I have, and it just got denied. Now, I felt that, like it brought it home to me how that can be very frightening, actually, because you need this medicine. They haven't approved it. So now we're in limbo. If I weren't attuned to this industry and having the background, I might have freaked. I'd be upset and mad and scared all at the same time. I took it with a grain of salt because I know it's part of the process. But a lot of people, elderly people, people who are battling illnesses, just fighting for their life, don't have time to navigate all this. And so it's incumbent upon us, as we represent clients at QuickMed Claims, to try to be compassionate with patients and still be a bulldog enough with the payers. You kind of have to have the devil on one side and the angel on the other, and be the devil with the payer and yet be an angel to the patient. And that's a tightrope that we try to help. This committee is trying to help our people, the stakeholders at QMC, understand how to navigate those different waters, and we're getting somewhere, and that's the good part.
That's important.
And it's been very rewarding to be part of it, I must say.
And not to go down a rabbit hole with this, because I think the information Charlotte provided is extremely valuable, but folks, the reports are out for the ground ambulance data collections survey, and as we just mentioned, every dollar counts. And Chuck, if you read and I know you did, the voluminous reports that are out there, it basically said it costs about, now of course the price cost may vary, but in these United States, to pull that ambulance out of the garage and go on call, what is it, Chuck? About $1,500.
Yeah, well, it's a little more, and it depends on what data you look at, but there's about a $300-$400 gap between costs
Yeah.
and
So
reimbursement every
yeah,
time.
if I'm
And then now you got me on a pain point, buddy, because the government just MedPAC, which is the Medicare arm that studies all this, is trying now to play down that gap, and they're actually excluding a piece of that we all painstakingly gave them data to understand it, and now
yeah,
they're downplaying that because they don't like the fact that it came back with
exactly
results
right.
that we all
Yep.
expected. And so that's another podcast
Yeah,
altogether.
that's
But
that's another
yeah,
podcast,
like come on, folks. And the
but
gap is real. You only have to look.
yeah,
I mentioned I was doing Con Ed. I'm doing Con Ed to renew my EMT. And in a recent call, it was mentioned that I think it was month before last, 5 ambulance services in Pennsylvania closed their doors, just stopped
oh my
operating.
goodness,
5
yeah.
in
That's
1 month. That's crazy.
terrifying.
It's crazy.
Well,
That's terrifying.
I mean, Chuck, I'm going back to the 70s here in Allegheny County, where the city of Pittsburgh is. And, in our heyday, we had 134 ambulances. Was it too many? Oh, yeah. We had ambulances on every street corner. But we're down to less than 30 right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And, what does that mean? That means that you, Mr. or Mrs. Consumer, may have to wait a little bit longer for that ambulance to come from not the town you live in, but maybe the
No.
town across the way. And when that happens, it takes longer. And we all know when it takes longer to get the ambulance there, what the outcome is, sadly, in some cases. So
It's very concerning.
It's very concerning, without question at all.
Yeah, and it's not just rural areas.
Oh, no.
Anybody that follows EMS in the Chester County area down there south of Philly, a big healthcare conglomerate just closed its doors. 2 hospitals, a whole EMS system serving Montgomery and Chester County down there. They're done.
Done.
And it's concerning. And so everybody had to scramble, find coverage, and like you said, Gary, some of those ambulances it's taking a few more minutes to get there, and time is life.
Absolutely
So
right.
we've got to fix this dollars and cents thing, and abiding by the rules is something we want to do. And
But
get
this
the
is
most
very
money
good
we can.
information. This is very enlightening, and I hope it strikes a chord with our listeners, because there's a lot of work to do, and sadly, you have to, button up your boots and
Yeah.
get out there and do it, because
Mhm.
it's not going to happen without some collective involvement.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have a law in place today, this is how our whole evolution started. I came into the organization. What do you do when you're a new compliance officer? You go out and you make sure, hey, this rule's in place. Are we compliant? Right. And then it evolved from there. So I went out, are we compliant? Yes, we're compliant. Then I started, okay, there's nuances and challenges and all this other things. So if you've got a law in place, make sure you're being compliant. That's first and foremost, right? Because you don't want to get into a situation where you're balance billing where you shouldn't be. Make sure you understand your nuances, how they're affecting your process, that you're addressing those pain points, and that don't keep those pain points to yourself. Communicate them to somebody larger who might be able to impact a change in that legislature. And if you don't have it in place today, know that it's coming, know what they're thinking about saying, and try to do something to steer the course of it so it lands in a beneficial, easy to administer legislation.
Yeah. So Charlotte, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So you've been a QMC for, did you say 10 months?
About 10 months now.
And yes, I know you have EMS going in and out of your house every day, but when you started to learn about this EMS stuff, what was your first oh my moment? Like what did you notice that was like such a surprise to you about our industry?
So there's a couple of things.
Okay.
One, how little contracts exist, right? That was just being very hospital and physician focused for a long time. That was really kind of foreign to me. Like, what? We don't have contracts. We don't know what expected reimbursement is. And then, having been in hospital, we had some hospitals obviously that had ambulance, and so I knew some about ambulance billing. And I was like, I was going to enter the EMS world completely. I thought, how hard can it be? There's only X amount of codes. Okay. When I come from a, inpatient billing with, just tons of them out there.
Yep.
And then I get in and I really start diving into the EMS world. And I'm like, holy smokes, this is a really complicated industry for
Very
so
much so.
many reasons. And I think anybody outside of EMS from the revenue cycle side doesn't necessarily have a deep appreciation for that. And I'm surprised all the time at the complexity that exists in this world. And of course, complexity leads to problems sometimes,
Yeah, sure.
right? The EMS clients, they are the best. Our CEO describing me as interview is like, these guys are the salt of the earth, and they are. Like it's I love our clients so much. And they are so passionate about what they do. I don't think you can be in an EMS and not be passionate about it. And I just love the clients in this industry more than I have enjoyed clients in other areas of healthcare.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Incredibly dedicated individuals, having spent 50 plus years in this business, and Chuck's right behind me. And, these folks are not living a life of luxury. They're not vacationing in Cancun. They're working long hours to keep their family afloat. And if you ask them why they do it, it's because they truly care about taking care of their neighbors and the people who get up in the morning. You've heard me get up on the soapbox, Chuck. Get up in the morning, throw their pants on, kiss their family goodbye, and then 10 minutes down the road, it becomes the worst day of their lives. That's what they're there for. And
this makes me feel good every day about coming into work. Every day.
This week, Gary and I both on each side of our state attended celebrations of life for two individuals who have passed that were just giants. Here in the East, gentleman, Gary in the West. And, their dedication, leaving Thanksgiving meals, running out because the radio tripped. The ambulance parked in the driveway so they can see their kids for a few minutes while they're on shift. It's interesting. I have Time Hop. I'm on a 7-year run of Time Hop. 7 years, I haven't missed a day of my Time Hop. And just the other week, it popped up that my daughter was going to the prom. She's now 33 years old and married and a teacher. But it popped up and reminded me that day I posted, I'm hoping that I don't get a call so I can see my baby before she goes to prom. And I'm not saying that because of me, but that's magnifying times a million across these United States and across the world, in many cases where people are giving up and giving of themselves in order to make EMS happen. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. And I'm not surprised, Charlotte, that you noticed that. Of course, you live with it as well, but it is a calling, and almost I'll liken it to my son-in-law, who's a pastor. He's called to serve people. EMS people are very much like ministers. They're called to serve people. And if you are an administrator and you run an EMS organization, you are called, because you got so many herding of cats coming at you every day. Staffing challenges, financial challenges, protocol challenges, dealing with medical
succession
directors.
planning. It goes on. The list is long.
Yeah, it's very long.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Well, it's been wonderful having you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just
I
a
hope it's
window,
helpful to somebody.
just a window into what goes on behind the scenes. It's more than sending bills out, folks. So, if somebody in your organization is saying, I can buy software and I can sit in the bay and, I'll crank out those bills. Let me tell you, it's a lot more than that. Yeah. And again, I'm doing a shameless plug, but there's a whole lot of reasons for using a qualified third-party organization that has wonderfully talented people like Charlotte and her team. And,
absolutely.
And we hope that if you're out there shopping, we hope you take a look at Quick Med Claims, and they certainly will have your back when it comes to that.
Yeah. And Chuck, I think you'll agree that Charlotte was a great guest, and I'll put her on the spot once again and say we'd love to have you back sometime. I'm sure you've got lots of goodies in your bag that we can probably get you to comment on or jump in with your own 2 cents on what you're seeing. This
love
is
to come
the stuff
back. I'm not as funny as you and Chuck, but I love talking privacy and compliance. So
notice she didn't say funny looking Chuck.
Well.
But I
She's
get
being
it. I
kind.
get it.
She's being kind.
She's being very kind. She really is. So,
Yeah.
well, listen to you. Thanks to all of you who
you.
are listening today. We appreciate you taking time out. Sadly, we did miss our EMS week episode, but I think you know by our talk today that we surely understand the challenges that you face, and I can assure you that the three of us who you're staring at on the screen or listening to the audio track understand, believe in you, and thank you with all our hearts, because someday, and I hope it's no time soon, but someday we'll all suffer our worst hour.
Yeah.
And we sure hope that you guys will be there for us. So thank you for all that you do. It means a lot. So Chuck, thanks for joining in again today. Charlotte, thanks
As
for being
always.
there.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. And true compliance lady there with her little whiteboard behind her there, compliance because our clients deserve it. So
Every day.
I think that's something great to always take a look at, and keeps you on track, right? It really does. Good.
Right.
But thanks for everybody for joining in. And Charlotte, you know what to say here. So we only have one more thing to say to all of you, and that's, hey,
Be
be safe out there.
That's right.
There you go. You got it. You'll have it for next time.